Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to Overtime. Today was anticipated by many to be a day of great violence across this country. The FBI was concerned that there were protests planned in all 50 of the states at the state capitol buildings. And there was evidence that this had been organized and that there was going to be some effort to do that. There were a number of protests across the country, but they were, for the most part, all reasonably small and largely insignificant. They never exceeded more than a couple of dozen and were met with overwhelming numbers of police and other security forces. So it appears like, at least for today, not much has happened or is going to happen, sort of, at least in that regard. We are going to discuss, unfortunately, it's amazing how many crises we are facing at one time. Of course, the COVID situation has been with us now for over a year, and so we are so used to it that we don't think of it as a crisis anymore, but it certainly is not what should be our natural state, and the numbers are, as they've been for quite some time, extraordinarily concerning. While there is, in fact, promising news regarding a number of effective vaccines, there is also, unfortunately, some concerning news that has been coming out recently that we've learned. Research by Leicester University and the Office for National Statistics has found that the long-term consequences for COVID appear even more serious than people had thought for the survivors. Out of nearly 50,000 people who were discharged from the hospital in the first wave of COVID, 29.4% were readmitted within 90 days, and 12% later died. Those who were readmitted were suffering severe heart, kidney, and liver problems. One of the more common issues was an increased diagnosis of diabetes, either as a result of your ability to make insulin, which would be type 1 diabetes, or type 2 diabetes, which would be your own body developing a resistance to insulin. Currently, the cutoff for recording deaths of COVID is 28 days after a positive test. But the data suggests that because of these long-term consequences that can cause fatalities months after diagnosis, that the metric for COVID deaths need to be changed, and that the more accurate number would be something rather larger. It also suggests that the long-term consequences to hospitals are going to be even more severe than we are already seeing, since now there will be a 3-month lag of a new spike of symptoms, especially ones that require long-term, if not permanent, management. Also, initial tests of the new African variant of COVID, called B1135, seem to indicate that the antibodies that one gets from any of the other variants, in particular the first variant, the Chinese variant that we so often think about, are not actually recognized by the, or I should say, they do not recognize the new variant, the B1135, in roughly half the cases when someone's been exposed to both. What this means is that, well, so before we go any further, I need to remind you that antibody recognition and the use of antibodies by your body's defense system is actually only part of the entire immune system that your body has. There are other elements, such as spike protein recognition, which was not considered in this study, but this does suggest that overall immunity to the Chinese variant, whether you get that immunity because you've had it before and so you're immune ostensibly for a couple of months, or through a vaccine, that immunity is severely diminished in efficacy against the new African variant. Another variant, E484K, I have to say, they deal with so many variants and they deal with so much. I understand why they just use names and numbers. It makes a lot of sense. I've done a lot with programming, and in the end, when you have to deal with large numbers of things, you just you can't make up new names. But if we're going to improve science communication and make it so people can actually find this approachable, especially the people who don't and who, when they hear about COVID, just go, not because of COVID, they're bored. That was the joke. At any rate, if we're going to do that, we have to find some better names for these things, because these names don't catch well and people don't listen to anything after B11. At any rate, this new variant, E484K, appears to be both more infectious and possibly as much as 90% resistant to antibodies and any immune defenses that result out of infection from or vaccination against the first variant. This is obviously very concerning. That would the other concern, and we've discussed this before, and this was always something, unfortunately, that's been, when COVID first hit, we did shows talking about one of the severe issues would be mutations, and something that we would face, especially if it's been around long enough. It's been around long enough, and mutations may not be a serious thing, or they may. More likely, we'll have a few serious ones and many not so serious, and where we're going to land is anybody's guess. But at this point, we seem to have one variant which appears to have some resistance to the body's immune system, and another variant which seems almost immune to it. And the second one being, unfortunately, more infectious than the original. That's also one of the things that happens, of course, when you do treat these illnesses, which is the more virulent and hardy ones are the ones that are going to survive and reproduce. Evolution. It's real, believe it or not, and sometimes it sucks, too. At any rate, Los Angeles County continues to be devastated by COVID-19. It has surpassed 1 million cases in Los Angeles County alone, making California, now I think they were the first state to exceed 3 million cases. Hospitals are continuing to have difficulties. They are having to further expand their mortuary capacity. They are having internal disasters, including the one we spoke about not that long ago, the freezing of the oxygen systems, because the pressure inside drops so much that the temperature drops and the pipes freeze. They're overwhelmed, and it's not getting any better. And at this junction, we anticipate it continuing to get worse. There are so many crematoriums now burning the bodies from COVID-19 that they have had to lift air quality standards. These standards would inhibit how much smoke could be put into the air by any number of organizations, but crematoriums among them. And they were barred from burning more than a set number of bodies per month. That now has to be lifted because, air quality aside, they have to dispose of so many bodies. There's really no other choice. So they are also anticipating a large surge of infections to start roughly any day now. These infections fueled by gatherings over New Year's holiday and super spreader events from people who have decided that they really don't have to worry about COVID. At the same time, Trump has issued an executive order saying that he intends to remove the travel bans on Europe, the UK, and Brazil. These are the very bans that he put in place late, I might add, saying that he was going to protect Americans. Really, he put them in as a retaliation when those countries banned us. He is lifting them now as what appears to be a retaliatory FU to Biden. He's lifting the bans as an FU to Biden. Biden's not the one who's traveling overseas, and he's most likely not the one who's going to get COVID as a result. Nonetheless, Brazil is hit pretty hard with COVID. The UK and a number of European countries where COVID is a problem, all of the bans to those countries are now going to be lifted. Biden has said he will immediately reinstitute those bans as soon as he gets into office. Meanwhile, it was also discovered that the Trump administration has given nearly $1 million in small business loans to anti-vax businesses, which promulgate lies and misinformation about vaccines and about the COVID vaccine in particular. This means that our government, which ostensibly is there to educate people about vaccines and help ensure we stop COVID, was also at the same time helping businesses, all of them, by the way, banned from Facebook for promulgating lies about vaccines and science denial. Our government was giving them money so they could stay in business. In a number of cases, it appears these businesses would have gone under were it not for the business loans. Probably the reason they would have gone under is because nobody's putting any money into them because they're fucking crazy. I will say, I'm glad we don't live in a government, I'm glad we live in a Republican administration as opposed to a Democratic one. I would hate to see the government picking winners and losers. It also appears that Trump will issue as many as 100 pardons tomorrow, many of them to political loyalists, favors, or rewards for being loyal to him. Apparently, there's also going to be, there's everybody from rappers to right-wing political nuts. We will see, but it's anticipated that it's going to be precisely the list you would expect of his wish list. It is reported that he is not on that list. He's not put himself on it, whether this is because he is aware that he actually can't pardon at least a number of his crimes alleged against him, because once you're impeached, you can't do that, or for whatever reason, he appears not to have put himself on the list. We'll see. I think you can expect a number of his members of his family to be on that list. It's going to be what one New York Times reporter said, a gross violation of the intentions of the Founding Fathers. Welcome to the Trump administration. Meanwhile, Colorado Representative Lauren Boebert appears to be in some hot water. So a suit has been filed against her in U.S. District Court in Boulder for her blocking of her constituents on Twitter. She had blocked anyone who was critical of her, anyone she didn't like. A number of people have called her authoritarian and called her out on Twitter, and her response has been to block all of them, even if they are constituents of hers. It was determined, I think, 3 or 4 years ago that a political person who has an official account on Twitter that is used to disseminate information cannot block their own constituents. This was determined when Donald Trump tried to block people on his Twitter feed, and they sued. And since it was, in fact, an official White House communication, he could not block U.S. citizens. They had, in fact, a right, and I'm not entirely sure I understand how or why, but a First Amendment right to read his Twitter feed. So there has been a First Amendment violation suit filed against her for blocking people on Twitter. Having said that, that's the least of her problems. As part of their investigation into how and why the some members of the Capitol Hill rioters were able to find their way around, and how and why they had maps, and how and why they were able to find offices that were purportedly secret, it is believed that they, at a minimum, took tours, if not had help from congressmen. And there have been a couple of accusations against certain congressmen. But in this case, all the members of Congress have been asked if they gave any tours in the weeks leading up to the Capitol Hill riots. Lauren Boebert said no, she had not. But at this point, Representative Steve Cohen says that that is not true, and he is aware of sorry, I got thrown off there for a second. He is aware of tours she, in fact, did give. If that's true, since those were, to the best of my knowledge, sworn affidavits, that means she has lied to the Capitol Police or whoever it is, probably actually the FBI, who are investigating the Capitol Hill riots. If that's the case, she is probably in very big trouble, and which begs the question too, why is she lying about it? So at this point, and there are some who have accused her, she is very decidedly right-wing. She is very decidedly in the Trump camp. So I think there are going to be some questions as to what happened on that tour and why she has failed to report it. Meanwhile, a number of Ted Cruz's staffers and former staffers have reportedly been so disgusted with his behavior that they are all threatening to quit. They have pointed out that many of them were there cowering from the protesters and rioters as bands of them were going through the building, and he seems to have no regard for the consequence of his actions. He has been called out by the largest paper in Texas, and they've said he really has to go. In addition, Riley Williams, a 22-year-old Pennsylvania woman who was captured on multiple cameras as being in the storming of the Capitol, reportedly told her boyfriend that her intention was to grab Nancy Pelosi's laptop computer, which is in fact missing, and to sell it to Russia. Yes, that was her plan, and she told her boyfriend. She was there, she was in the vicinity of the office, and the laptop is now missing. That's espionage. Oh, God. Oh, God. I laugh. I probably shouldn't. These are obviously very serious charges, but it's that woman who was sitting there, and we've shown the video now 3 or 4 times. She was sitting there, blanket over her, and she's like, oh, my God, they pushed me. Where were you? Just like a couple of feet inside the Capitol building. What were you doing in the Capitol building? We were storming the building. Well, why? It's a revolution. And she got pushed, and she's whining about it. These are not world-class spies, and I don't know what they're expecting. People have a tendency to die in revolutions on both sides. The disconnect that allows them to glorify this as to it's just some star-spangled, Jesus, dear Lord. And I see that Neil joined us, so I wanted to give a shout-out to Neil, who we always love it when he comes by. And good to see you, Neil. And he's actually been a guest. And I got to do his show and my deconversion story, which I very much enjoyed. So thank you for joining us, Neil. So moving forward, the social networking site Parler is now back up, but according to Chris Vickery, who is a cyber risk researcher at, actually he's the director of cyber risk assessment at UpGuard, 100% of their traffic is actually going through Russia. Yes, it is going through Russian Federation servers, meaning that if they want to, if they lived in a dictatorial society where you didn't need a warrant, say, and you did what what Mother Russia tells you to do, they could read everything that's on there. Parler is expecting a more permanent solution to stay back up within the next month, but for now, that's what they are. That's where they are, and it is cited the taking down of Parler, the taking down of Twitter and Facebook feeds of the largest agitators is credited with helping inhibit their ability to organize for the planned protests for today. Let's see, last but not least, Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney, who was the highest ranking Republican to vote to impeach Trump, has now been censured by her own party, the Republican Party of Wyoming. They are also she is facing calls for her ouster as the chair of the House Republican Conference, which makes her the 3rd highest member in the House. Meanwhile, the head of the Republican Party has also said that if Texas decides that they are going to secede, Wyoming will join them, and that they are following very closely what Texas is doing, and they are now actively advocating Texas secede from the Union. We've discussed this before. Texas ranks 43rd in education, which means they have a hard time adding, which is probably why they don't understand that for every dollar they pay in taxes, they get $1.30 back from the federal government. They're one of the states that actually receives more than it takes, mine being a state that I get 70 cents back for every buck that I put in taxes. So my state is paying for their state, and even though they've got that extra 30 cents on the dollar, they can't break 43rd in education to tell them that if you secede from the union, you need to print your own currency. You need to find a way of making up that 30 cents, which also happens to make up 30% of the state budget, which will be gone the second they do that. And they can't buy or sell enough oil to make that up on their own. You need a navy if you're going to sell your oil to other countries. They can't do that. So they're going to have to sell it to the only country around them, the United States, who now can buy it at just about any price they want because there's no competitors for Texas oil. And Texas is going to have a problem because they can't use the interstate highway system anymore. They can't use the FDIC to get loans. They can't get business loans. They can't get insurance. They can't get all the FEMA assistance. That wasn't FEMA, actually. I thought FEMA was going to be another issue. All of that gone. And they already can barely pay to keep themselves functioning while fighting COVID. Wyoming's in a worse situation. Bregwin said this, and I thought this was apropos. They would be reduced to third world status almost overnight. Frankly, I'm inclined to say, let them do it. Let them do it. If the U.S., I'm tired of having people south of the Mason-Dixon line saying that if I hate America so much, why don't I leave? I don't hate America, and I have no intention of leaving. But it seems they do. So, bon voyage. I think the wrong side won the Civil War, quite frankly. Our punishment for the Civil War was that we had to keep them. So they can go. And I apologize if I'm getting a little, I get a little, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. We're all in this together. I genuinely don't mind that I get back 70 cents on the dollar. The states that need the money should get the money. That's because we're one fucking country. I'm perfectly cool with that. I just hate it when I'm told that nobody messes with Texas and they're the best state in the union, and they don't acknowledge the fact that they really couldn't get anywhere without the other states. We're in this together, folks. But if they want to leave, let them. See how they do. Hey, maybe they'll prove me wrong. Anyway, that's the rundown. That's everything that's going on. We are expecting, I would like to see what's going to happen tomorrow. My hope is nothing. My hope is that, we're going to get the pardons. Like I said, we're expected to get about 100. And people who've seen the list say it's exactly what you would expect out of the Trump administration. Tomorrow would have been the second or third, depending on which count you go by, of protests at all 50 capitals. Most of the protests didn't amount to more than a couple dozen people, and they saw the overwhelming force and decided not to get rowdy. So overall, I think things are going well on that front. The COVID numbers are obviously really bad, and that news about the new variant is a serious problem. But we're going to stay on it. On Wednesday, we're going to have on Dr. John Shook again to discuss something a little less controversial. He will be on In Time. It's part of our philosophy series. This time it's going to be epistemology. What is truth? And we're going to discuss what is truth. How do you know that something's true? What does it mean to say that something is true? Very much looking forward to that show. I have a penchant for philosophy, so I'm looking forward to it. I think Vox will be there. Vox has said she's going to be there, so hopefully Vox will be there. And then we're going to have Maudie on to discuss human memory and the hindsight bias. How do we change our own memories? How do we change our perception of reality? And what is memory really there to do? What do we do with it? We'll be seeing that week after this one. So I hope you all will join us. And I think that should just about cover it. I see a lot of people in the live chat. Thank you all for joining us. We got a $2 super chat from Jake 4D. Jake, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We sincerely appreciate your support. And this show wouldn't go anywhere without the support of people who become members, people who become patrons, and people who do the super chat. So thank you very much for your support. $2 super chat. First Brexit, next exit. Yeah. Except this one. I mean, I really couldn't. I've had it. I've had it with the threats. The reality is, most of the politicians there can add, actually, and they know they can't secede and survive as their own country. They will fail. They will absolutely fail. They don't even have the ability to print their own money yet. They will fail. And if the United States doesn't help, which I think we absolutely should not, and start by closing the border with Texas, then without help from the U.S., they're gone. They're gone. They're absolutely gone. So I think most politicians who talk about seceding are doing it only to play to their base. They know full well that they can't do it and it would never work. But I've just about had my fill of that kind of strategy, because that is exactly what has landed us here. Ted Cruz and his ilk, who have denied the vote, or didn't deny the vote, sorry, tried to deny the certification of Biden's win. And they knew when they were doing it, they'd lose. They weren't trying to win. They just wanted the audience to see. They were just showing off for their constituents. Well, that's what these clowns are doing. They're saying, whoa, Texas is going to secede and everything's going to be great. And the problem is that when you talk like that and when you do things like that, people start to believe you, and then they expect you to fulfill those demands. And if you don't, you either have to cop to the fact that you were lying, or you have to blame someone else. And since I'm usually the one who gets blamed, me and my party and my side, for the fact that people were stupid enough to follow these politicians. Politicians like, what's his name? Oh, he was governor for a little while. I can't believe I've forgotten his name. Oh, I did not like this guy. Ran for president. Also did if I became president, there were three things I would do. I would abolish the, I think it was the gold standard, abolish the education department, and I would, Perry. That was it. That was Rick Perry. So I think these guys are, no, it was Rick Perry, a clown who veiled threats of secession, and on the grounds that it got his I love Neil. Okay, yeah. Veiled threats of secession on the grounds that he would explicitly for the purpose of playing to his base and getting them all agitated, and then you end up with what happened at the Capitol Hill riots, especially when you cannot deliver, because you know as well as anyone else, you can't promise, you cannot deliver on any of those promises. That's what the people who were saying, I'm gonna not certify the vote, they were issuing a tacit promise to help stop Biden from getting into the White House because he apparently lost, or it wasn't a valid election. The problem is, since it was, you're not going to be able to put your money where your mouth is on that one. And when your constituents ask you to, you're going to have to pass the buck. And they're going to get pissed, and they're going to want to go out and kill people like the Vice President of the United States. It's that kind of rhetoric that got us into this fucking mess, and it really needs to stop. It should actually be fucking illegal. I'm for free speech, but you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, and you shouldn't be able to use rhetoric on something you know for a fact you cannot deliver on. Texas is not going to secede. They should. I'd pay for it. I would give, I've said this before too, and then I'm going to go because I'm already getting on. I would be happy to say that Texas could get their share of the of taxes as a state that they've been getting. They can continue to get that share without paying their fair share of taxes. Just get the revenue for 6 months. 6 months if they'll secede. Heck, give them a year. We'll pay them to secede. They won't do it. because they're not quite that stupid. So, and I say that knowing too that Bregwin is from Texas, and please, everybody, take. I have friends from Texas, but I have issues with the state in general. I do. I apologize. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and I think we will, like I said, we will see you on Wednesday when we cover epistemology. What is truth? And then next week when we have on Christopher Maudy to discuss human memory and the hindsight bias. So thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to catching you all on Wednesday and or probably tomorrow, assuming that there's some. I'm not going to place bets on seeing you guys tomorrow. Probably see you all tomorrow. Have a marvelous evening. Thank you for joining us.